there's ultimately two types of people: those who've got their heads in the sand and like, I'm trying to get away with this, and those that realize that actually, if they rethink how things are done, they're going to get much, much better outcomes. And there is one thing I can guarantee you: there are two things that are true in life. One is that the earth goes around the sun. The other is that every single company is an absolute shit show of knowledge. And those two things are true. And as a result, like when you look at AI, the most important thing to think about is like, how are we structuring what our business is behind the scenes that it's referencing? It's one of the best examples of corporate transformation because they came up with a new approach. They realized there was this new theory of like, there were serial killers out there and they had to go find them. They realized there was a new theory. They then had to create processes to distribute that across the rest of the FBI to help change it. They had to get senior leadership backing, and when they didn't have it, they didn't get anywhere. You need all of those things to implement AI. And I've told so many CEOs of global companies, go watch Mindhunter.
Today, our guest is probably one of the most interesting people I have ever met. I'm going to call him the world's most interesting man. Neil Mann used to be a war correspondent for the BBC. He's been part of a very, very senior leadership for a huge agency over in New York. And now he's the co-founder of an AI startup, which means that Neil brings like this phenomenal background and just like a really, really interesting human being to speak with us today about how to be an AI leader in your organization. Before we get started and welcome Neil into the space, I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors. This week's featured sponsor is a company called Planable. Planable are the social media scheduling platform that we use day to day at the Marketing Meetup. And they've just released a brand new feature which enables you to compare your data from across the various platforms. So instead of pulling, your LinkedIn data, your Pinterest data, your Facebook data into one space, they do it right for you, and it's beautiful. So do check out Planable. Also, a big thank you to our other sponsors. We have Wistia, we have Cambridge Marketing College, we have Known, and we have Frontify. Every one of these companies support us and mean that we can do what we do. And now we have an absolute legend on screen with us, in Neil. Mate, thank you so much for being here. You're dead appreciated.
Anytime. The vibe in the chat is great. I'm loving where everybody's from as well. Great to meet everybody. Thanks for inviting me on.
It's wicked, mate. You're a hero, and the community is just incredible, as always. So usually what happens, and I need to give some behind the scenes for folks here, is that sometimes if I give questions, if I'm doing a Q&A format with our speakers, I'll give them the questions beforehand to make them feel comfortable. Neil, on the other hand, went, no, don't give me the questions. So today, Neil is coming in and being as surprised as the rest of you. So the first thing is I want to speak to something which I've observed in you in our conversations, Neil, which is that you are excited about AI and you're excited about the opportunity for marketers specifically to engage in AI and the leadership role which they can take in organizations when we're thinking about adoption for AI. So tell me about that. Why are you excited for marketers in specifically and the opportunity that they have to take a leadership position in AI in our organizations?
Yeah, this is, I mean, it's a great question, right? And I think one of the most important things, just to level set with everybody and like kind of the past few years of my career. So I'm one of the founders of Known. We're building a completely AI native business and we ship that to our customers. Prior to that, I ran a consulting division out of New York for an agency called Anomaly, leading transformation, future product membership subscription with global companies. I've worked with like Expedia, Booking, Google. And then prior to that, I was part of the team transforming News Corp, which is around subscription. The reason I say that and why that's so important is AI is a transformation for any business. And that's the first most important thing to understand. But what makes it really exciting in my mind is that for the first time, it's a transformation that can be led by marketing. Because up until now, you see, most transformation was led by product or business, and it's out on the other side. And then if you think about the way marketing was historically done, you would change the product, you would then work with the marketeers to go market, and then product and marketing became one and the same. But what makes AI different, and what we're seeing, I think is so exciting, is that the way that AI works is that it's ultimately a knowledge referencing machine. It's a knowledge prediction, knowledge referencing machine. a lot of that knowledge sits and is controlled in the marketing teams of global companies and small companies. And as a result, like the semantics matter of how you build that out, marketing can actually lead the charge. And you're seeing this in some ways now in the way that most people are using it to do, a lot of basic things like content creation, etc. But what it's done is put the power in the hands of the marketeer, which for me is quite exciting because for years the CMO was trying to get in the room around the transformation and they were
Totally.
trying to be involved in it. And all of a sudden now, because of what AA does, they're like front and center of that. And we see that with our users, but I see it with every one of the C-suite I've known for the last 15 years I'm talking to. It's all in the same place. It's all sitting and coming out of marketing to start with, which I think is quite exciting.
Hugely exciting. To have that proverbial seat at the table is something that a lot of marketers have wanted for a long time. And so to have that opportunity is huge. And I just want to reference in your answer there as well, because I think this is probably a really interesting and important framing for this conversation, is that you use the word transformation there. And coming into today's session, we can spend a lot of time, and we will spend a lot of time over the coming weeks looking at AI tactics and prompting and everything to do that. This conversation is all about like making it work in your organization, which is potentially it's bigger, but it's also like way more interesting in a way, because this is about changing, not just about a tool which may change in 6 months. This is about changing how we work, which as an AI startup founder, that must be quite challenging as well.
Yeah, I think so. This is really exciting, right? And there is one thing I can guarantee you. There are two things that are true in life. One is that the earth goes around the sun. The other is that every single company is an absolute shit show of knowledge. And those two things are true. And as a result, like when you look at AI, the most important thing to think about is like, how are we structuring what our business is behind the scenes that it's referencing? And as a result, like you can look at this in two ways. One is we can use AI on the side and we can try and actually like try and bolt it on a little bit into what we do. And somebody's off prompting on ChatGPT. Or we can say, hang on, our business does this, and let's look at the way we're structured and try and leapfrog ahead a little bit and actually think about like creating proper single source of truth and referencing that and just rethinking how, for example, marketing or processes are actually done. And I think that like when we talk about what transformation is within an organization, it's refocusing the way that everybody works. Like that is the key thing is how do we work? And one of the most fascinating things for me about AI, having seen a lot of major transformations in companies, and if you think back over the last 15 years, even just within marketing, right, you've got the transition to membership and subscription,
Mhm.
which ultimately what it meant was we would own the customer relationship, which then meant from a marketing perspective, we wouldn't just do purely mass reach marketing. We would try and bring people into our ecosystem, launch things like Hive, like you guys have done, and then it changes the way you think about marketing. There's been some big transformations, but now this one re-architects your entire business around like how you structure the knowledge that AI references. And that is really exciting if you're a marketeer because like that sits in your pocket, most of that, and how you communicate it. And for us, like, yeah, it is challenging, but we've realized that there's ultimately two types of people. Those who've got their heads in the sand and like, I'm trying to get away with this.
Mhm.
And those that realize that actually, if they rethink how things are done, they're going to get much, much better outcomes.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that. In the first 7 minutes of us talking, probably the word "exciting" has been mentioned 7 or 8 times. It feels like a great framing for the spirit of the conversation as well. I'm also laughing in the chat here. We've got Joel saying that your son quote was an incredible quote, and we've got Sarah saying we've already got the social media snippet. So you're nailing it, mate. Um, let's do one final bit of table stakes for this chat, so that we're not leaving anyone behind, because this could be a bit of terminology which does leave people behind. So when we speak about like an AI native company, it can sound a bit enterprise. It can sound a bit, like not human. So what does that mean to you? Because I think part of what we're hoping to achieve by the end of this conversation is giving people a direction on how to achieve this sort of AI native company that we speak about.
Yeah, so this is like for me, the definition of AI native company is an AI is a company that's built on foundations of AI through the entire product and experience. So that is quite like a revolutionary concept. And most people are in quite a historic business. They've got lots of different historic processes. But if we just take a really good example, we went back to the drawing board when we founded Known and we said, what is the future of business built on in the age of AI?
Mhm.
If one thing in particular is true, you can talk to AI directly. Like, what is it actually built on? It's kind of funny that people think it's built on PDFs. Like in all honesty, right? Like, because it's not. And that was the one thing we went back to the drawing board on. It was like, what is it built on? Because the future of the way we communicate with AI is definitely not built on PDFs, which are ultimately built on documents which were designed when people had desks stacked with paper.
Mhm.
It's not built on that.
Mhm.
So we went back to the drawing board and said, what is an AI native company? And to us, an AI native company is built on facts for your business. So we've stripped everything out and gone, how do you build a foundation for a truly AI native business? And we build that on facts. And we believe the future of AI human interaction is what we call fact control, right? Which is what does the AI know? So you're not using AI to reference documents, you're using facts to control what AI does and executes. And just to give people an understanding of this, like particularly in the marketing space, a really good example of a fact is your brand positioning. A brand positioning is a fact. But the
Mhm.
reality is, across most organizations and all the major ones I've worked with, you're probably looking at maybe 100 brand positionings decks buried somewhere in G Drive, which you're asking an LLM to go and find and work out which one is your actual brand positioning. But there is one brand positioning exists. Your pricing is a fact. Businesses are just built on facts.
Mhm.
And they're not
Mhm.
even built on memory. If you hear the word memory in AI, it's a real misnomer because memory is everything that ever happened. And businesses are not built on memory. Businesses are built on facts that update over time. Your quarterly goals are a fact. Your KPIs are a fact. Your prices are a fact. Your brand positioning is a fact. So for us, an AI native company has facts at its core, and then ultimately you can talk directly to that, and then everything built on top is powered by AI. So for example, on our business, if you create something, it's automatically tagged. You don't have to think about it, and
Mhm.
it all does it itself. And the one thing I would say about what we're doing that makes us a little different is we're building for one person to run an entire company.
Mhm.
That's our focus. We're not trying to paper on the cracks of enterprise, but then teams can use it. So, whilst it can sound a bit enterprisey, actually it's easier to implement if you're a smaller business. We've got British farmers using it. And this is the funny thing. We've got Power Users WhatsApp group, which has British farmers in it and global CMOs in the same WhatsApp group because they're all trying to achieve the same thing. But for us, it's powered on facts. It's got AI through it so that everything happens automatically. And ultimately, within probably 6 months to a year, you're just talking to it directly.
Love
That's what
that.
we're doing anyway.
Well, so it's a great takeaway right from the off, so a discovery of the facts and hopefully, it's my job to help the community hopefully understand how we go about doing that in the rest of this session. And I'm either going to ruin the session now or make it amazing because I want to hit you with a scenario straight off the bat because I hope this will illuminate and sort of bring into practice some of what you've just been speaking about. Um, so I've imagined a member of the community here, but I'll speak as if they're asking. So the question is, or the scenario is, I'm in a mid-sized business. No one or very few people in my business are doing anything meaningful without AI. But I can see so many opportunities to integrate AI into our workflows day to day. We have, however, no strategy, and I worry that we're just going to end up with a series of disconnected experiments. How would you help me turn that into a structured, long term approach to integrating AI into my organization? And I suspect some of the answer to this will be about facts and finding facts, but I'd love you to let us know about how to do that and how to do those things.
Well, first of all, congrats to this made up person because they're basically living the corporate like world of enterprise. Right? And that's most enterprise organizations. And honestly, you get this a
Yeah.
lot when you're working with the C-suite of global companies. It's like, hey, we've got no strategy for X. We need to bring innovation into the company. What on earth do we do?
Yeah.
There's no direction. I mean, first of all, like just to go back and like level set on like transformation thinking and theory. And I saw someone in the posted actually in the community this that they were looking to help innovate in their marketing department with AI, which I thought was just such a great thing to do. Um, since my time at like News Corp, for example, we ran corporate innovation programs where we got teams to innovate.
Mhm.
The most important thing when you're doing that is that people can get overwhelmed really quickly with lots of change and lots of things happening. So
Mhm.
what you want to do is you want to pick one long-term goal that you want to achieve that's directional for like how you can improve the business. And then another key piece of just advice is that really when you get to that, you then want to pick off. And I was told by a mentor once, and I think this is so true. So here we want to go to this direction. We want to become AI native. We've got messy processes. We've got XYZ. We can't solve them all at once. You just can't. No organization can.
Mhm.
What can we achieve? And for example, with AI, one of the things might be, businesses are powered by content. Every business globally is powered by content, large and small. A really good example is, whether it's newsletter creation, asset article creation, content marketing. Pick an area of your business off where you can say, I can create gains here by streamlining operations, by easily staying wins, and then driving that one thing forward that gets you to your longer goal. And that's a great example because content marketing ultimately will get you to a higher, bigger business goal on bringing users in, etc. And there's a KPI you can attach to it.
Mhm.
And then you can use multiple tools if you're not fully AI native or willing to make the big shift. You can use multiple tools to get there. But that's the first thing to understand is create a long-term goal, pick off one area that you can execute. And then we always used to just at global companies pick content off, by the way. Like if you were changing memberships and subscription, the first thing to pick off is content. And
Interesting.
another piece of advice is to do it in one department only.
Right.
Because what will
Right.
happen is if you do it in one department only, as soon as you start to see wins, every other department wants to be involved.
Nice.
And it's really easy to transfer that to another department because you've created processes and approaches that work. If you're in a mid-sized or small company, pick one person. Don't pick an entire team and say, I'm going to work with you, right, on this, and then move it forward. And then say, right, I'm going to find somebody else.
Yeah.
So that's a really good strategy for actually expanding across an org. And then just one other thing on this that I think is really important to understand is something I learned was a term, the frozen middle,
Okay.
which when you know it, so the frozen middle is a great way to explain corporate transformation. The frozen middle is ultimately that the C-suite want to change and they want to advance, and they
Mhm.
know they have to because the share price will drop if they don't change, etc. You've got younger junior members of staff coming in going, there is a better way to do this. This is screwed up. Why are we doing an XYZ approach? But then you've got a lot of people that literally just want to get paid and go home and pay the mortgage.
Mhm.
And understanding that is actually really important because you need to lead that middle on the journey, and they may not be the ones you use to get there. You might use someone who's more junior, who's got the skills, but what you want to make sure is that you then take it and then enable the people who are in the frozen middle to move those processes forward.
Nice.
Um, and that is like just a really important piece of thinking that I've always found really key to understand. And you will find people in the middle who want to change, they're frustrated,
Yeah.
but a lot of people don't. So
Love that.
combining those approaches, pick one area off, find the right people that want to do it, and then don't overwhelm people is really, really vital.
Love that, mate. That's so, so helpful. I think for anyone trying to implement any kind of, even if it's like Notion into an organization or Trello, I think there's a lot that folks can take from that right there. So thank you very much. I think that's super practical.
I would also give you one practical piece of advice, which is when I was at News Corp, I was part of the team transforming News Corp in Australia around subscription. It's a big organization down there. It was a big shift for the business. It was hard to drag people out of the print world, but somebody had a really smart idea. They put on every single floor of the building a live map that had every new subscription that was being sold pop up on the map across Australia. What
Nice.
that meant was everybody who walked into the building that day, they might be the most print journo ever, saw the sales going through on digital,
Hmm.
and it created a feedback loop of change. So
Hmm.
make sure you include in that like some metrics on targets, and you can give feedback to people on like how we're actually improving. Because
Hmm.
otherwise it's kind of a nebulous thing that's going on. Whereas actually you're like, look at what we've done. We've managed to achieve X number of pieces of content, or we've grown this. Those kind of stats are really vital.
Make it super visible. Love that, mate. That's so, so good. We've got James in the chat saying, "I love that map idea," which is wicked. Um, we've also mentioned a couple of terms in the chat so far. We've spoken about facts and we've spoken about semantics. And I have the knowledge of having had a couple of conversations with you before where we've sort of drawn out these themes before, and I found it really, really interesting about how we think about these things. So I want to dive into this because I think when we start this process of transformation, establishing what the facts are, but also this idea of semantics, which we haven't yet introduced in this chat, is going to be really, really important. So could you speak to these two things? Because I think I know that you've already done a bit on facts, but I think it would be great to find out about how we get consistency in our facts, and then the semantics point after that.
Yeah, I think the key thing so I'm not here to obviously push my platform because we're building to enable this, but I want to give everyone like takeaways on facts.
Mhm,
Let's just take the brand positioning fact, right? As something we've all worked on. I'm sure everyone in this chat, myself included, has worked on brand positionings. Traditionally, if we think about a brand positioning, it would be created, put in a deck, and then distributed across all of these different teams and said, this is our brand positioning. And most of the time, it's like, can you work out how to deliver on it? Maybe someone's done some brand experience principles of what you should deliver on this brand positioning. That's ultimately a fact. So the key, most important thing to understand about AI is it can reference that fact and bring that brand positioning to life, right?
mhm,
And so that is a vital part of your strategy. And the words within that brand positioning are really important. Now, two things need to be true. One, you only need one brand positioning because
mhm.
there can't be two facts. And it's funny, if you want to understand facts, go and ask an LLM and do it after this course. Go to ChatGPT and say, how bad would your output be if I plugged you into an enterprise business with a massive documentation and PDFs and etc.
Yeah.
See what it says back. It'll tell you, it'll give you bad responses. It'll tell you it won't work out what the truth is. It'll lay out everything I'm about to lay out to you.
Mhm.
So the key first thing to understand is like a fact, and there must be a single fact that AI can then reference.
Nice.
As soon as you do that, you get guaranteed clear output. So breaking your business up into key facts, and as a marketeer, actually, this again is the easiest thing to do. Mission and vision, brand positioning, all of these things are key facts for the business, target ICP, like they're facts, right? So having single facts that you're using AI to reference makes it clear for everybody, and that's one of the biggest problems. And obviously, we're trying to solve for that. The second thing about semantics, which I find so exciting if you've come from marketing, and I know a lot of people, I saw a couple of things in the chat where people are like, I'm a bit intimidated by it.
Mhm.
Honestly, you're in the driving seat. And in my mind, there are two people in the driving seat in this, marketeers and ex-journalists, because they know how to create definitions because most people don't know how to create definitions, right? I kind of straddle both of those worlds. And the key thing about semantics is if you think about a brand positioning, I spent so long at Anomaly in New York with like the head of brand strategy, and I was leading transformation, and we're noodling words on a slide for like the chairman of Expedia or the CMO of Microsoft. You're working on these days spent on single words, like what would happen is we present that deck and everyone, yeah, that's great. Or CEO would say, change that word. And then boom, it's stuck in a G drive somewhere and it doesn't come to life, right?
Mhm,
Um, Now, what's really important is for the first time ever, the semantics of your strategy, if it's actually being referenced, can be executed by AI.
mhm,
And that is incredibly exciting if you're a marketeer. If you think about where the future's going, you will have multiple agents. I mean, we're on the verge of deploying this, multiple agents that are deployed from a single platform with a single fact that they can reference, that they can then bring to life in multiple different ways. The semantics of what we do actually matter and the words. And on our platform, it's funny because we see a lot of people come in and they'll spend hours noodling the words in in their facts because
mhm,
they see the impact it has. So that's the two major key things is like, facts are ultimately what I would call the nerdy way of describing it is like ontological definitions. They're definition of things, right?
mhm.
Like, and that's key and that's a fact. And then the second is just how you bring those to life, actually finally make a massive difference, which is really quite for us is really exciting.
Absolutely. So I'd love to dive a bit further into the semantics point because I think it's like it's mad important. Um, so I think yes, marketers are amazing at putting words to things and giving definitions, but finding consistency in those definitions across organizations where everyone agrees that orange means orange is tricky, and like we know it, and but when it comes to what you're speaking about here, which is we want to create an AI native company. We're going to build an AI native company off a series of facts. And what we're saying is that everyone here agrees that orange means orange in our brand positioning statement. Um, how um, how do you find that semantic point? How do you find that consistency with the rest of the team? Because like I can imagine there's folks watching in today who like, yeah, I've worked so hard to bring this statement to life, and then my CEO thinks that orange is actually like a bright orange, and I think it's a dark orange or whatever it means. But the thing you're saying here is this stuff is really, really important.
Yeah, so there's two sides to this, and this goes to a question in the chat that I'll also reference in this as well that I just saw pop in.
Mhm.
The first side to this, right, is that I cannot tell you how many global companies I've worked at where UX is using different words to describe the same thing as marketing.
Mm.
Like I cannot, like honestly, we're into the dozens. Every single time I use discovery, everyone's talking about the same thing, but in totally different ways. So that's the first thing is that you just need a single definition of everything across your business. And that's the most vital thing. When I used to work in transformation, one of the first workshops we would ever do is on content. I think we've talked about this in the past, but I'd be there with the C-suite of a global company and I'd say, well, you're paying me a lot of money to come in and help you build content strategy across the business. My first question is, what is content? And everyone looks at you like you're mad. And I say, there's stickies on the C-suite of Microsoft, there's stickies on your desk. Write on it and stick it on the wall. You'll end up with 100 different definitions because no one has a clear definition of what content is, and no one can be put in charge of it, etc. So what you're building is a structure for how the company refers to certain things. And every company needs that. Most of the time, they've just organically developed
Mhm.
over time, bolting things on. So the first part of that question is you have to do it as
Yeah.
an organization. The second part of the question is getting agreement and alignment on what that is really like an internal thing that people need to work through. But I think the most important thing for a marketeer to have in their back pocket there, and now you can do this with AI, right? Is traditionally it'd be hard to say if we change this, it will have this impact.
Mhm.
But now, as a marketer, you can spin up a brand in 5 minutes. So
Mm.
you can show the way that these two things actually come to life, and you can use AI to like say, well, actually, that change, if you think it's this, I'm going to show you what this really means or how this is going to get referenced. So you can all of a sudden you can visualize like 4 or 5 different brands with different changes. So you're in almost a stronger position to have the conversation. I thought there was a good question from George in the chat that I was going to reference because this also reflects this because many businesses are multi-brand. So George asked kind of, how would you approach a multi-brand business with a plan for central compartmentalized database, pulling on the data and different brands rag. I personally wouldn't touch it because I'm trying to rebuild that so you can run multiple companies on known. I'm not trying to solve for enterprise as it stands because of the mess. And one of the things to understand about RAG and for everybody out there who's maybe not into AI as much, what we're essentially talking about is the ability for AI to reference knowledge.
Right.
And the problem with that is if you plug that into your mess of knowledge, so your Google Drive and everything else, it doesn't know what the truth is. And a way I described this to someone recently was if you're using a company, if you're working with AI and you've got clear facts and single facts, it's like walking into the street and asking someone where the pub is. And there's one person in the street and they say, just take the second left and you'll find it. If you're working with a completely incoherent knowledge base, it's like walking into the street and there being 100 people there and asking them where the pub is and everybody shouting different directions. You'll never find it. And that's ultimately what that approach is. We're rebuilding that from the ground up because we believe there's like a better way. And now I think one of the most exciting things is like now's the time to make a decision to move on and park the old ways of doing things and bring in a new approach. And we're seeing that with some big enterprise companies who are like, do you know what? We're going to spin off a centralized team. And guess what? It sits in marketing, who's actually in charge of like the future of AI. And then we're going to build it from there. And then we're going to bring everybody else on. So does that answer your question?
George will pop it in the chat to see whether he answers, but you answered mine at the beginning, so that's fabulous. Let's take a change of pace and go for a big open question because we went deep there in models and frameworks, and James, my co-founder, will probably be smiling at me because I'm framework boy and he is creative mind boy. So let's speak a little bit more to creative mind and big thinking stuff. So let's just ask you, what's one misconception that you see when folks are trying to adopt AI into their business that businesses hold just blooming everywhere?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest misconception is that the problem is with AI, like
Hmm.
hallucinating. Like I mean, this goes to what we were just talking about. But that is one of the biggest misconceptions is that AI is really bad, that you get hallucinations at scale again if you have no facts. So I don't want to just bring it back to that. But that misconception is huge. And really, most of the problem is you, and most of the problem is the way that your organization is structured. I think the second one is that people jump a little bit, and this is a little bit tangential, but people jump way too much on the flashy new stuff without realizing that like it's not necessarily scalable.
Mm,
And you see a lot of excitement in the marketing community around all the different things you can do. But actually, realistically, are these going to move your business forward that you can go and create like a really good quick clip that's of a certain style on Veed when like really you need to move the business forward in another way? And perhaps there's like simpler AI applications that you can execute time and time again and get efficiency from. And I do think a lot of people get caught in the shiny.
mm.
And if you're bringing that into an organization and going, look what I've just done on like VO, Ferrier, etc., then I think you're going to struggle to like make actual change happen because nobody else can go in and replicate it. Whereas if you're focused on some of the ones that are a little bit more straightforward to execute, that's going to be easier.
Love that. And like, let me turn this into a question directly at you. So you're trying to build an AI native company. Um, what's the biggest mistake that you've made in trying to build this?
That is a great question. It's a
It's
really good
horrible
question.
questions.
Yeah, it is a really good question. And it's something, what's the biggest mistake I've made? I'm very fortunate. I work with like an incredible tech team.
Mm,
And my technical co-founder is has been through Y Combinator, has worked at Anthropic, is very, very smart in like how he lays things out. So I think what you'll find with a lot of people is they'll make technical application problems. They'll try and implement technically within a business that's just not ready for it.
mhm.
Um, I think the biggest mistake I made was who we're targeting.
Yeah.
That was the biggest mistake I made. And I'm learning now, and it's funny to be on this call because this is actually a good insight in how the market's changed. When we first launched Known, it was very early, it had very limited functionality, but we had like entrepreneurs starting to jump on.
Mhm.
And we had a lot of entrepreneurs coming to us. And then the product has evolved substantially. And now we are focused on one person running an entire company. So, like, we want to empower entrepreneurs from the ground up because that's what we believe will grow the economy and help people really, really build businesses. But we're realizing now, actually, probably our use case is marketeers who then need help with the likes of sales because they're often working with sales teams who are using decks from 5 years old. And by the way, that's another thing I've seen from like a lot of major companies. So you're not on your own. So I think working out who we're targeting with an AI native business is not easy because somebody put it in here actually. I saw a great point of like, how do I get something in where I don't need a decision maker involved? When you're building what we're building, we see the value and we show people like this and you do a demo and people are just like blown away.
Yeah.
But then you're trying to find people who understand it. And it's a real like it's quite an advanced like product in many ways, and you need to be advanced in your thinking. And just finding the right people and working it out is quite difficult.
Mm.
And that's probably the biggest mistake well, not a mistake, you're always learning. And I think like that's the key for every company is like who are we going after? You're always learning who you're trying to target.
Totally. And I actually want to sort of give credit to you here as well, though, because you and I have probably been speaking on and off for 4 or 5 months or something like that. And you've always wanted to lean into this community, and so of all the speakers that we've had in TMM over the years, then you've been the first one to jump into Hive and sort of chat with people, and you've taken a couple of calls with people over this week, and I just want to acknowledge that as well and say thank you because like I think that's it's just a really big deal, and so the fact that your willingness to speak about the mistakes as well and sort of be open in that way is really really appreciated. So you know. We'll do this business thing. We'll try to figure it out, but the fact you've done that is really appreciated, mate.
I
So.
really, I appreciate that. And honestly, like to throw this out to the community, I'll put it in Hive. Like, imagine you're in my shoes, right? Like, you've got a fully AI native business. I'm building a company that you can talk to by voice,
Mhm.
which is such a crazy concept that people, but if you actually watch some of the things we're releasing, like if you check my LinkedIn, you're like, oh, I can see this is not far away. We've just got an 11 labs grants to do it. But my challenge to the community would be help me position this thing because that is actually one of honestly, that's the hardest thing to do is position it and work out how to communicate it
Mhm.
because you're telling people two things. One is, well, three things. One is fact based,
Mhm.
like you need a fact layer in your business, which is so new. Two, you're telling them that all your business connects. Marketing and sales are not siloed anymore. Like this is all connected. And three, you're saying you can talk to your company by voice. And everyone's like, what? And they're like, no, no, you can't. Let me show you. So like for me, it's such a hard challenge. So it's quite nice being part of the community. And I'll throw it in the hive later and say, like, honestly, any advice given and please give me the shout. I take a lot of solace in and I'll drop this in there too. One of my old colleagues at News Corp launched a marketing platform called Clay. And Kareem has talked at length about like it wasn't an overnight success because they had very similar problems. They had a horizontal product that did lots of things,
Yeah.
and it took them 7 years to find who they were going after. And I'm sure there's people in this room on this call who use it. And he talked about in that like how what you're doing is really trying to just talk to the people who are using your product and getting feedback, and then building for that, and then working out who wants it. So the more you can talk to people, if you're building anything, the more you can actually talk to your customers, the better. I
Totally.
think.
Totally. And I think it's in a funny kind of way, and this is supposed to be a smooth segue as well. Like I think a lot of the challenges that you feel, maybe not so much on the positioning point of view, but certainly, the adoption point of view, are probably the ones that are mirrored by folks in the chat when we're speaking about adopting AI, right? Which is about like trying to get into their organization. And so in a way, you're trying to do exactly the same thing as they are. And so just to replay, the first sort of 35 minutes of this chat, I've taken an awful lot just from that idea of getting that one person on board, and sort of having that quick win, picking one area to go after, and going for that. I think that's great. I think having your facts in place seems great. An agreement about semantics feels intuitive. All these things aren't small, but I think what's interesting as well is to look at a comment here that's come from Victoria. So Victoria put in the chat here, just can you come and present to our exec? And I think it was an amazing comment. It made me smile. But I think it's also like there's probably something huge here, which is like people are going to find resistance points when it comes to transformation at various different stages in the transformation. And so like these tactics become so, so important. So, again, I'm blowing smoke here, but I appreciate it because I think
Well, there's
this helps.
there's a really good book I'm going to drop in the chat called Tribal, which is worth a read, and it's on the three types of people. Like he calls them heroes, the ones who are willing to do something new. And if you look through human history, there's always people who want to do something new. And then you've got traditionalists who are tied in culture and what they want and what they think the culture is. And then there are peer people who are focused on ultimately peer pressure. And if you look at any organization through those three groupings, you'll see it, right? You'll see, I get it. The tradition, and I used to have it at big companies and be like, well, that's not how it's done. We do it like this. They're the traditionalists. And then you'd have the heroes who are like, this is screwed. I want to do something better. I'm going to go do it on my own. And
Yeah.
then you've got the peer group who are like, when they see the heroes do that, they'll go with them. And so it's a really good book for anyone to read because it will give them a good understanding of really what AI implementation is. And like I say, it is a transformation. The other thing I would say, and none of you is expecting this, is watch Mindhunter on Netflix. I mean, deadly serious. If you want to know about corporate transformation and what it takes to change a business around AI, watch a series on Netflix about serial killers. And the reason I say that is because the transformation of the FBI around the way they changed their approach to serial killers is one of the best. It's one of the best examples of corporate transformation because they came up with a new approach. They realized there was this new theory of like there were serial killers out there and they had to go find them. They realized there was a new theory. They then had to create processes to distribute that across the rest of the FBI to help change it. They had to get senior leadership backing, and when they didn't have it, they didn't get anywhere. You need all of those things to implement AI. And I've told so many CEOs of global companies, go watch Mindhunter. And they look at you and then they go watch it and they go, I get it now. Like you need all those things to make change happen. And they had to find those peers and they had to find the heroes who would take the new approach on. And it honestly is like the best show on corporate transformation I've ever watched.
Love that so much. We've got Hannah in the chat saying that's the trailer snippet for TMN webinars. So there we go. So let's recap because I can see we've got 5 open questions, and I want to folks encourage you, if you see a question in the chat you want us to prioritize, please give it a thumbs up. That's in the Q&A feature. But while you're doing that, I just want to make sure that we do a recap on the promised takeaways that we had for this session. So we spoke about how to make the case for AI to senior stakeholders, what good AI leadership looks like in practice, and building confidence in your team to experiment and adopt AI. So for my mind, we definitely covered off the third one because we've been speaking about those small experiments, the structure that we want to do. We've spoken a little bit about making the case for AI to senior stakeholders, which I think falls in the same bracket. But what good AI leadership looks like in practice is possibly something we haven't covered off quite so much here. So for you, what does a good a good AI leader in an organization look like, and how do they operate in our organizations?
I think a good AI leader has an understanding of how AI works, number one. I
Hmm.
think a good AI leader is ultimately, and you may even see the resurgence of this role. They are like a knowledge expert of the business, and they are massively into knowledge structure. If you are talking about AI in the organization and you are not talking about how you better structure your data and knowledge, then you're a bad AI leader, in all honesty, because the
Nice.
problem, it's a knowledge referencing machine. You need to be talking to people about that. Like, yes, it's prediction, but it's also referencing. So a good AI leader does that. And then I think similarly, they're focused heavily on accuracy.
Hmm.
That for me is if you want, because you have to be realistic about business, right? Like we're not in this for to play games. We're in it to actually grow businesses. And as a result, like you need to recognize that accuracy is vitally important in AI. And how do we build processes amongst teams where we are streamlining and getting better, faster output? And that could be decision making, etc. Those three things are really combined. You understand AI, you understand how you structure your data that you're inputting, and then similarly, like you're focused on accurate output, I think is really important. And being able to sell like this, part of my job for years has been selling to C-suite a vision of where they need to go, whether it's a transition on product or membership or subscription. Having a vision is really important. And I would also say to people like understand where this is going because I can tell you now it's going to full voice control. And if you really want to, if you want to know where it's going, drop onto the 11 Labs website. I'll send a link round. Click on the agent and talk to the agent that explains to you how 11 Labs works. We've just got a grant from them and think about what's happening behind the scenes because you'll recognize where this is going and it's way beyond learning prompts.
Wow.
This is like fully automation, full automation. And then just to be a good AI leader, it takes one last thing, which is what's called first principles thinking,
Mm.
which is you really go back to the drawing board and say what's possible, what's actually possible,
Mhm.
and how do we leapfrog the thinking. And again, I'll drop this in Hive. I'll put a load of links in Hive.
Mhm.
But you need to really think in first principles, like not trying to just move things on incrementally, but actually, if we've got this technology and we've got new knowledge, like what could we really achieve and how do we get there?
Yeah, I love that, and thank you for speaking to that. And the first principles feels important because to link another point that you made there about knowing where this stuff is going, but also first principles thinking. It strikes me that one of the biggest challenges with this and being an AI leader in your organization is probably that part about knowing where things are going. My contention would be that Sam Altman doesn't really know where ChatGPT is going. So actually being able to predict where AI is going to be in 5, 10 years is pretty tricky. And so how do you sort of reconcile that part of it?
There's two cool schools of thought, right? And like one is Sam Altman is in the we're going to keep scaling, 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 and the LLMs are ultimately going to be some godlike creature that solves all the problems.
Hmm.
And then you've got the other school of thought, where actually scaling laws don't work and you're going to end up starting to see failure. And you see that right now, like that's what everyone's recognized. The market's recognized it. Zuckerberg's come out and said, maybe there's a bubble. Sam Altman's now realized there's a bubble, talking about there's a bubble. GPT-5 gets released. It gets really bad reviews from amongst a lot of the people who understand it from the scientific community. They're in that space. I'm in the space of where if you have a single source of truth, and you use the tooling and capabilities, you're basically plumbing things that will get you to almost full scale automation. And that's almost a different thing, right? Because he's in the AI, he's in the AGI. If we keep training up, training up, training up, we're going to get AGI. I don't think that's happening. It's not coming, and everything seems to indicate that's not the case now. If you want to follow a good person to read is Gary Marcus, who I'll also send around, who does a great newsletter, who's in the exact opposite camp. I'll send that around as well. But yeah, I think knowing where it's going from first principles perspective, if you can talk to AI now
Hmm.
and it's got tooling capabilities to execute things behind the scenes, a lot of the way that we think of communicating is going to change and fundamentally shift. So you want to kind of position yourself there and then, okay, what does that mean for how we structure as an organization? And that is quite advanced, granted, but like that's what's happening in the world right now. So it's worth knowing.
Love it. And I'll pop the QR code up on my screen right now for Hive because you've referenced a few things which you'll pop in afterwards, and hopefully Sarah watching in as well. will be pleased, who's our community manager, that I'm referencing Hive again. Sarah says thrilled in the chat. So while that QR code is up on my screen, let's make sure we cover the questions from the community because ultimately every one of these people are the most important people here. So we've got this first one from Rasheen. And it's an open question, but it's a popular question. So Rasheen asks, what are some of the best applications of, Rasheen says it in marketing that you've seen. So I'm going to assume AI, but feel free to, and this is an invitation, so don't throw tomatoes at Neil, but what's the best applications of known in marketing that you've seen as well, your company?
Well, this goes to actually another. I saw Alice in the chat there saying she works for a small business, and as a marketing one, it's hard to find key facts, no budget, everything's organic, probably paid email. Where would you suggest starting? Honestly, one of the most exciting things for me is I'm now getting enterprise companies coming on our platform. But what we found is smaller businesses, it's much easier to develop your facts knowing them yourself.
Mhm.
And most entrepreneurs know and understand and run all parts of the business. They're not siloed. And so the best successes we've seen from a marketing perspective are smaller businesses who've gone, this makes sense. I understand it. I set my facts. I can then create what I need. I can then pump out the blogs. I can do everything else and get everything going. And yeah, I really love that. We've actually seen multiple people on our platform grow their first business and then launch a second and run that with AI, which has been incredibly exciting across lots of different sectors. The other thing to me that's just, and this is total aside, but just builds on this. Honestly, one of the things we're not talking about is how accessibility changes with AI. We over-index with founders. I know this for a fact. They told us who are dyslexic, for example, because they're systems thinkers, and all of a sudden they don't have to write like they used to. And so I'm looking at people doing incredible things who traditionally wouldn't have had access to these tools. And I could talk about the flashy things of AI and marketing, but to me, that actually is like really quite powerful and makes you understand what's possible.
Totally. I love that. We had a webinar a long time ago actually about accessibility and the fact that just struck me was something like 20% of the global population has some form of accessibility requirement. And like when you think about 20%, one in five people, to open that up to folks is brilliant. Really, really brilliant. So love that. Let's take the next question from James as we head into the last 10 minutes. So James says, how important is it for you to protect your business IP with a structured and protected approach to AI? So, I think you and I have had this chat before about like handing over all this information to an AI and sort of saying, here you go, here's everything. So how do you reconcile that sort of security and protection versus the want to engage with these kind of platforms?
The most important thing you own is your knowledge. And that is it. Like you must find a platform, or whether it's us or somewhere else, where like you own your knowledge and then you port your knowledge where you need it from an LLM perspective. Because if they're integrated via APIs, they won't be training. But that is ultimately your business. Your business is, and this is almost a reframe, right? Because I think a lot of people think of their business as a product they sell, etc. But the business is now the knowledge that AI can reference. And so owning that and structuring it and finding platforms that keep that and let you use multiple LLMs and because in 5 years there's going to be a lot. They're getting cheaper and cheaper to create. We saw DeepSeek. So you want the ones that you can port where you need. So it's vital to choose those type of platforms.
Nice. I love that. And what's really interesting coming through the questions here? So we've got two coming up, one from Kate and one from John. I mean, this is a webinar ultimately about transformation, but there is just so many. You can see the layers of concerns and questions and tick boxes and things that we need to kind of think about when it comes to this. So I think James's question was a great question there about security. The next one comes from Kate, which is about sustainability. So Kate says, I work for a conservation charity and being tasked with the creation of an acceptable use of AI policy. So how do you manage the debate on sustainability or carbon usage in AI? And I know this isn't necessarily a specialist area, but you'll certainly
Well,
chop it up.
no, it is. We're a partner with the Blue Earth Summit, and we're actually on their Ventures program. And
Nice.
we're actually powering their application process at the moment for the B100 competition. One of the reasons is like we create accurate output. So we've got to all accept we're using AI. If you've been using email for the past 10 years, Gmail is like auto-predicted what words you're going to type next. You've been using AI in some capacity. We're all going to use it. But We focused on creating accurate output, so you don't need to waste time and energy. So find platforms that are based around accurately, very quickly getting what you need. If you are sat there banging away on ChatGPT, giving it 10 lines of prompts and XYZ, then that is going to have more of an impact. There is obviously always an environmental impact, although the latest studies show it's not as bad as we think compared to like watching Netflix for 10 minutes or etc. But yeah, we really focus on accurate output. We spent a year trying to make sure we get accurate output with AI. And one of the reasons is exactly that, because we want to make sure you're not burning
I love that. And I didn't even mention you're a surfer in the introduction as well. So
it.
like we're just adding cool points here. So mate, thank you for speaking to that. The next question comes from John. And so we've spoken about security, we've spoken about sustainability. John has got a big open question here, which is only 7 words, I think. And John says, how do you incorporate governance into the implementation and transformation of AI?
You use platforms like ours. I mean, we specifically with that at the core. You know, we literally just released 5 minutes before I came on the call. We've released new permission layer, which is executive, marketing, sales, creator, and owner. And each one of those has facts that can be restricted across different teams. So you can be an executive and restrict facts from other teams, and they can't even ask the assistant, like, tell me about whatever. It won't let them do it. So finding platforms that have governance integrated is really, really important. And again, like this is the moment to try and move to an AI native approach, I think, because otherwise you'll find yourself in a couple of years' time with people just banging away all over the place, which in many ways is what happened with like the social media transformation, right? Like brands would find, oh God, there's 70 people in our organization who are tweeting and doing things off brand. Similar kind of problem. You want to kind of centralize. So yeah, I mean, try and find platforms that have that embedded within it.
Love that, mate. Again, I want to invite you because you've been very restrained for someone who's in startup mode, to sort of be respectful to the community and not overly sell. But like, I know that in 4 minutes, people can have meetings and they're going to drop off and stuff like that. And you've helped our community. So like, what can people do to find out about your business so that they can sort of figure out, everything that we've just been speaking about with governance and everything. Where's the best place for them to start
Well, the
looking at your
first,
stuff?
yeah, I mean, that's great. The first thing to do is just grab time on my calendar, honestly, and I'm happy to talk about any of this stuff. So it's not just a demo. I can show you what Known does, and I can talk about your problems and how they work. Because I learn from you, right? Like if you tell me about your business and what you're doing, um, I I will learn from you. So that's number one, is just grab time. I'm happy to chat. And then number two is you can jump on Known, and then we also have like a WhatsApp group where I drop links daily. And then we have what we call Known University, which has kind of tips and tricks. You know, what's really fascinating about building an AI native company from the ground up is I don't know what people are going to do with it, which is kind of crazy. And so we learn from people using our platform what they've done, and then we go and tell that to the rest of the community. Um, so yeah, that's kind of those are the best things to do really. And then just give me a shout in Hive or book time. And I'm happy to chat to people around. I think I'm talking to somebody tomorrow around there, like how they transform. You know, because for me it's just useful. It's always good to meet new people. We're all half of us are building these things remotely. And honestly, like I mean, we met just via like outreach, right? Like we were just chatting, and I've made so many good contacts by just doing startup kind of chats that happy to meet anybody, just grab a slot.
Love that, mate. Thank you, mate. That's really appreciated. I wanted to make sure that we gave you the opportunity for that, before we drop off. But there's a few more questions that we'll take before we close off. So we've got George. George, who offered a great question earlier on, and he's returning. So George says, "Thanks, Neil. I know it's a big question, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on how a marketer could show how marketing should be leading the change." And I think we've spoken about some of this earlier on, but like a great summary as we close out the session.
Yeah, I'll just give you a great example of what I've seen across like global companies over the last like 7 years is that marketing has often led the change by doing things like shifting to content marketing, right? Number one. So if at a global company level, what they've done is they've built a content marketing team, and I used to have to set these up for clients and build the organizational structure and everything else. But then by doing that, what they would do is they would shift the way they were do their approach to market, right? From traditional advertising to all of a sudden they're organically engaging with people, and then they're powering newsletters, and then all of a sudden they're powering customer communications and doing everything you're doing, kind of Joe with TMM and stuff. So first of all is to think about where marketing fits within your business, and then how you can implement AI to execute those things faster. And if you're not doing things like, regular newsletters, or, your blogs, get on it. Like, for me, I'll do, just give you a really quick sense of what I do for my company. So every morning at 5 a.m., because I'm a startup founder, but also dad of two young kids, so I get up at 5 to do some work. I would do a really quick walkthrough video of my product. It takes me like 2 minutes. I would take that and I'll drop that in our power users WhatsApp group. I will then take the transcript of that talk. I will then put it into the known assistant, which knows and understands the facts of my business. I will ask it very simply with through 4 words, 5 words, turn this into a how-to blog. It then turns it into a how-to blog. I then publish it on Webflow as part of a known university article, and 8 minutes have gone by as the fastest time I've done that, the whole thing in from start to finish. And I tell my users to go do that. That's a really good example of, like, within marketing, to say, hey, I've worked out a really quick way to go from like product demo to blog. And I'll then do an email. Like, those kind of little things are great ways to just show the impact you can have. I would say you always want to do it on a platform that knows and understands your company. But even if you're using one of the main AIs, you're going to be fast. But create a process for yourself, execute it, and then show people the impact that's had on your business or the responses you've got. And that will start to get people's attention, I guarantee you.
Love it, mate. That's absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much. We've got George saying he'll be stealing that one for sure. So, and George, you'll look like a genius. So, thank you very much for speaking through that, Neil, and good luck to George as well. That brings us to our hour, Neil. So, thank you so much, mate, for taking the time, for speaking with us, for leaning into the community, and for sharing with folks how they can actually practically do this. I appreciate sometimes, like, transformation is not the topic which is like going to get people like buzzing, but actually this is the stuff which drives business forward, and like that in itself is so important. So you got lovely human beings giving you praise, and you got a lot of round of applause on screen as well. So folks, last couple of bits from me. We've referenced it quite a lot in today's session, but if you'd like to join Hive after today, to have a chat, continue thinking about all of this, help each other out, then please do pop in. We'll be hanging out in there for the next couple of hours, and throughout the week there's like daily events that are going on in there now. Also, a quick shout out to the conference that's next March. If you didn't know that was happening, then now you do. Finally, well, two fun things finally. First, let's make LinkedIn's Neil's LinkedIn blow up for today if we can. That would be really lovely. Neil's found there. And finally, a big thank you to Wistia, Cambridge Martin College, Planable, Known, and Frontify. Fabulous companies who mean that we can continue to bring these sessions to you. So very grateful for every one of them. With all that said, appreciate every one of you. Thank you for taking the time. I hope the rest of your Tuesday is wonderful. We'll be back next week with a session all about how AI can help you create great social videos. Completely different world, but within the same category. With all that said, thank you everyone, and we'll see you next week. Take care.